thank you for joining us today. We're really appreciative of your time, and I want to get us going. We're going to hear this afternoon from the Reverend Sandana Gallman Ashley, our Transitional Synod leader. Sandana?
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone. And for the next hour, we're going to begin a dialogue. Today, every institution is questioning whether it is made of the stuff that is sustainable these days. In business, it is a new era of the changing to the changes in economic changes in the landscape of consumers, the accelerating digital transformation, the necessity to be now national and global organizations. Higher education continues to shift. Online learning that was a curious experiment when it began. Actually, distance learning began in the 1800s with the establishment of the post office. Boston, Massachusetts correspondence program was first called the Society to Encourage Home Studies. And in 1953, Home PBS referred to itself as the channel that changes you. They were the first public television station in the United States. Today, 1 in 4 college students take online classes. The movement continues of change and reforming all across every industry that we know about today. Institutions of higher learning are understanding that they need to address the needs of multiple types of students. They needed more flexible options for adult learners who were returning back to the classroom and going back to get more specialized skills, but yet had families to raise and they needed to work full time. How many of you am I telling your story? I certainly am telling my story. I remember that I worked through undergrad and worked all the way through seminary. I chose Johnson C. Smith Theological Seminary in Atlanta because it had an eye toward the future. You were guaranteed, if you completed your seminary education, that you could do it in 3 years as long as you maintained your courses. Other seminaries at the time required students to only take daytime classes. Some would not allow students to work. Other programs were only designed for traditional students who had answered the call right out of undergrad. For years, if you graduated seminary, it meant that you were guaranteed a call upon completion. The church would seek you out. You didn't have to necessarily seek out a call. But at the same time, on the other hand, there were many who lived a counter experience. Although called and gifted, their experience in the Presbyterian Church USA would be different. Their ethnicity made a difference. Their gender made a difference. Their first language made a difference. How they were abled made a difference. Their sexual orientation made a difference. The road into ministry would include unseen barriers that we are still overcoming. Yet it also created an opportunity for the before named to be trailblazers, to model a counter narrative than the stereotypes in society. Some were able to be the first in many of their roles as they offered their continued yes to Christ. Apparently, in 2011, the Synod leadership envisioned that the three formerly merged synods of the Northeast could take on a different ethos, becoming witnesses to the expanding community of Christ. Like the song Many, front of mind for the synod was the opportunity to model what Christ envisioned for the church, to have disciples of people from the margins and also from the mainstreams. I believe I'm correct when I say the term gospel communities emphasizes whosoever will, let them come. Last year, when your position was announced, I never imagined leaving Minnesota Valley's Presbytery at that time. I loved the people and the feeling was mutual. However, after being approached several times about the position, I asked, is God speaking? Is there an invitation here? So I started doing my research. I realized that you were a reorganizing church entity. Check. Your vision was clearly articulated. Check. You had experienced some difficulty. Check. You were in need of healing and bridge building. Check. There was a firm sense that you were on the right ministry path, but just needed to take a few steps. Check. I am a coach and an implementer. My metaphor in ministry is to be a midwife. I enjoy framing new paradigms. I understood from my previous work in the denomination that all Christian organizations were pivoting toward more sustainable development. So now we have 7 months of relationship together. And we are here on a journey, not just about modeling diversity and innovation, but answering the deeper query of what is the purpose of a synod in our denominational structure. How do we strengthen the witness of our gospel communities by first strengthening our presbyteries and our local congregations and pastors? How do we prepare our mid-councils to thrive, to be conduits and catalysts of effective governance, resourcing, centers for incubation and new ideas? How can our collective intelligence inform how we show up in the world and among our congregations? And how do we move away from transactional relationships to authentic ministry partnerships? I came to you with many curious questions. Our synod is blessed with financial resources and people resources. I came to this role knowing that we together can have a great impact on injustice through creating space for large-scale dialogues, authentic accompaniment, empowerment, pushing the envelope, and being wounded healers. Despite the challenges, I believe this synod has it going on. We are already geared up and leveled up for what's next. But like a bad dream, COVID showed up again and slowed our roll. And I would imagine you feel that push and pull. You are ready to move forward and to try one more time those go-to programs. And you wonder, can these bones live? Some of you are ready to try something new. You're ready, as I am, to redefine reality. We realize that we are ready, but we are still in this place of waiting. So it feels like we're at the ready and yet not yet place. We need more than just enthusiasm for futuring. we need staying power for the now. And as stated eloquently by Susan Beaumont, we find ourselves standing on the threshold of what is not yet over and what shall be. The scriptures for this year's Come to the Table event speak about resiliency and steadfastness, as you heard this morning. It's not just about our human power or our will to do something different, but it is more so about our spiritual ability to trust God in the in-between time. The people who heard Jeremiah's message, and we heard this morning Jeremiah himself, were in exile, waiting for God to deliver them the way that God had delivered the children of Israel through the Red Sea. They were faithfully trying to understand, how did we get into this place? And they wondered, how might we get out of our particular situations? But God said strange things to them. Pursue the welfare of the city that I have deported you to. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive. It made me think about our Native American siblings and our other siblings of people of color who have been on the margins of society, who have been waiting for centuries for society to repent of its complicity in creating structures of oppression. Folks are waiting for the church to wake up, to be woke. And I love the words of Howard Thurman that continue to challenge us. Thurman said, this basic fact that Christianity was born in the mind of this Jewish teacher and thinker appears as a technique of survival for the oppressed, that it became through the intervening years a religion of the powerful and the dominant, used sometimes as an instrument of oppression, must not tempt us into believing that thus was in the mind of Jesus. In him was life, and that life was the light of men and women. And wherever his spirit appears, the oppressed gather fresh courage, for he announces the good news that fear, hypocrisy, and hatred, the three hounds of hell that track and trail the disinherited, have no dominion over them. As we match our actions to our confessions, we cannot make empty proclamations about solidarity with the least of these. We have to do more than just invite folks to the table. Like Jesus, we need to overturn some tables. David Anderson Hooker challenges us to put our energy toward preferred narratives. Our business is human and social development, spiritual and life-transforming living. Our narrative work is moving beyond problem stories and societal narratives, dominant stories of scarcity and deficiency, of otherness. The discourse that the powerful use to influence how we believe, but we are working to actualize preferred narratives through our efforts toward transformation and building authentic relationships. Preferred narratives for persons and communities provide a range of choices and actions that validate equitable relationships, structures, and the distribution of resources. There is support for aiding, surviving, and thriving, for persons to be able to make full contributions within their context. So as we began living more fully into what it means to be a Matthew 25 Synod, Let us put our efforts toward congregational vitality. We will answer the call to eradicate systemic racism, creating frameworks that says no to empire, no to white fragility, no to subjugation. Let us be about the business of eradicating poverty and addressing food insecurity and aiding persons that are houseless and and tackling the Goliath of unjust laws that prevent people from living their full preferred narratives. So what's next? I'm glad you asked. The staff is working faithfully to respond to the needs of our Synod. We have heard you over the years ask us to be in partnership with you, and we are trying our best to do so. I will continue to learn, and I am learning so much about the stories of our various presbyteries. And I will continue to learn those stories as I am actively listening to our mid-council leaders. We will continue to offer, as we have been doing this year, Synod-wide training to equip our members, particularly for the work of CONs, establishing standards for commissioned pastors, supporting our new leaders in ministry, using the programs that we already have in place, the Servant Leadership Program, the Bob Washington Scholars, and the Early Ministry Institute. We will continue to support our presbyteries as they ponder how they might strengthen their ministries through partnerships. We will continue to support our presbyteries that are transitioning as they are looking for leaders that are ready to serve the church for this 21st century church that is so different. We are here to support our presbyteries, to answer those vital questions, to provide adaptive leadership. We are here to walk alongside and to be in partnership with you. We are working to create a culture of trust. We know we've got work to do to rebuild our relationships, and we're working on it. And when the way is clear, we will begin conversations about the New Way Forward 2.0. But in the meantime, we're not just marking time. Our prayers are powerful. Attending to the needs of those who are anxious about life is important work. Taking this space as a Sabbath, as an opportunity for reflection and assessment is a gift. We don't always have space to do this type of work. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve you. I am elated about what God will do in the future and what God is already doing. For the remaining of our time, what questions are you bringing with you this morning? Let's have a conversation. So I want to take the opportunity now to hear from you, to field some questions. If you have questions of me, please raise your electronic hand, and I'll ask our host to help me to see those questions. Any questions to start this morning? Mark Tannen, do you have a question for me this morning? Mark, you're on mute.
No, but I have a thanksgiving that you're here, Sandana. So thank you for your words. I guess I think that the Synod, like all the presbyteries, is at a huge turning point that we can just barely conceive of, and that as we seek to structure ourselves, we need to structure ourselves for something we can't yet understand. And I think that's where you're beginning the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Mark and I go back a little ways because we both have worked for the national office, and we know a little bit about pivoting and some of the things that you have to do in your discernment. Any other questions this morning? It's afternoon. Well, hearing none, let me tell you about some things that I love. I love preaching and teaching. I serve the denomination through providing leadership around forming our new presbytery leaders. So I'm on the faculty for the Presbytery Leadership Formation Program. I work with 4 of our transitional ministry sites and helping people to think about how they enter systems and how do they enter ministry. And certainly do work nationally with the denomination around polity issues and looking at our Constitution and interpreting that. I love church, and I love ministry, and I love the people of God. So I see that there are some hands raised, and so I'm not sure who was first, but I think maybe Betty.
Yes, good afternoon, beloved, and thank you, Reverend Sandana, for those introductions and the words that you just spoke. In the process of your message this morning, I wrote down a few things that you said, and one of them was about eradicating racism according to our Matthew 25 initiative. My question for you today as the Synod leader is, what is the Synod's role in helping us presbyteries and congregation and leaders deal with this issue of racism? What is the Synod's role? Mm-hmm. How are you helping the presbyteries and helping us as leaders in the church to deal with this issue of racism?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Betty, for that question. One of the things that we are trying to do is establish eradicating systemic racism as a value. So we want to begin with, where does this value align with our mission and our ministry? I particularly mentioned what happened in 2011 when the Synod made the conscious choice to look at how it was structured and to say, what can the Synod use its resources to do? To bring people together, invite a different type of table. And I think where we are now is that the Synod has a role of providing resources. I really believe that we begin with education. So we need to talk about and really name what is white supremacy, what is white fragility. How do we talk about these issues of unconscious bias, the microaggressions that we know are present? How do we not only invite people? That's something that I have a lot of concern about. I don't want to just invite a diverse group of people, in particular people of color who have been on the margins before, to a table that is not prepared for them to serve. My role, and what I continue to emphasize, that we need to not only invite, but prepare the table. So we need to look at those individuals, those congregations, look at our presbyteries to say, how do we make sure that we value eradicating systemic racism, and then holding the presbyteries to some standards when we are calling people into service, making sure that our ministers, I would like to see all of our ministers go through the diversity training. It would be wonderful if this is a value for our Synod, that we would make sure that diversity training is provided on a regular basis. And that as we continue to have large-scale conversations and dialogues around what we're going to do this week, talking about the impact of the doctrine of discovery, which is all through U.S. law. And you're going to hear more about that. We're creating space to have these conversations. And then how do we hold ourselves accountable to what we say we believe? So I want to stop there. I think you'll hear more about it, but those are some first steps for us. Patricia.
Thank you, Sindana. Pat from Brook Church in Hilburn, New York. I think one of the things that I know I can only speak on my congregation, but I am really appreciative for this conference today and tomorrow, because it gives the smaller congregations like us a voice. It also, instead of, like you were saying, I work in the recovery world also. Okay, recovery from substance use. And so we're having the same conversation. How do we pull in the minority communities or communities that don't feel the recovery center that's built is for them? And so this conversation is happening all over. But as like in the recovery world, in my Presbyterian world, you need to come to those little churches and see what's working for them and what's not. And let's build that model around what's working for them, instead of trying to fit them into a model, like you said, that wasn't created for them and doesn't fit their the traditions and the customs and the things that they were brought up to and have incorporated into their religion. Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing, because there are traditions and customs that were incorporated into our Presbyterian Christianity, and those things have to be included in order for our congregation to be successful. And that's what we need to have, that voice, so we can tell you that we're glad to be here. We just want more help from you to be present and to be a part of the presbytery. So,
Patricia, I don't know that I could say that any better than what you've already said, but to say, keep saying that, and we will continue to share your message. I have made a commitment to continue to support. There are some things that organizationally the Synod can't do. We support mid-councils as mid-councils support congregations. But there are opportunities for these larger scale dialogues where we will certainly look to make sure that we have the right voices around the table as well, that there is space for us to hear from all of our members. But I think what's really important is that we've got to learn to tune our listening in a particular way so that we are open to more voices. And then when people do speak, those voices have some weight. So we are committed to building relationships. And I want to say authentic relationships. I'm so happy that you're here today. Thank you for being here in your words.
Thank you so much. And just remember to listen with your ears, but also listen with your heart when we listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie.
Yes, thank you, Sandana. And actually, my question builds on Patricia's thoughts and her comments and questions as well. So I know that there have been, I heard you say that you have a love for preaching, and I try to think of ways that I can encourage you to preach more. And I was thinking, I think I've even said this to you before, about ways that the Synod can offer to, especially our smaller churches or to other churches, people who have no opportunity to get to a church for whatever reason, opportunities for a hybrid church or online church or a virtual church or a service that is sent out. And the Synod of Mid-America has a really good model that they send out a sermon every fourth Sunday. So do you think that that is something that we as a Synod might be able to put into place at some point, not just you preaching, but offering up, like Cindy Coleman had done that as well, offering up to presbytery leaders, to other people who just don't get an opportunity to preach as much for churches that need a preacher.
I think it's a wonderful idea. We certainly can put a catalog of sermons together for people. I really hope during these introductory months, and I'm saying that even though I've been here for 7 months, it still feels very introductory because COVID has limited the way that I can engage with the larger Synod, but by invitation. And I want to stress that because with our denominational structure, we don't skip over presbyteries. We work with presbyteries. So by invitation, I am happy to provide sermons to preach for congregations. But I also think we can go the step more. I do know that when I first arrived, that the Presbytery of Southern New England gave the Sunday after Easter as a holiday, gave a break to their pastors. And I preached a sermon for them. And they also had one other person, Claudio, who also preached. They actually had 2 Sundays off. And that worked very well. And I think we have a number of people who can certainly do sermons so that we can make sure that people feel resourced. So let's continue to talk about it. I think it's a fabulous idea, but invite us. You've got to extend that invitation because we want to work with our mid-council leaders. We're not stepping ahead of them in any way. Doris.
Yes,
an
hi.
old friend.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm on the Commission for Ministry in our presbytery, and I have a concern about pastors, lay pastors, and commissioned lay pastors. And in my investigation so far, I've discovered that there is a good hodgepodge example of that. Presbyteries do many different things, some good and some not so good. But I was just thinking, what if presbyteries are encouraged to somehow have a council of elders? The Book of Order says elders are supposed to be able to do the work, but just a group of elders who feel called to that position to be trained to help not only churches that are small, but any church. You could call a ruling elder to give a sermon. So it's just an idea, and I think it might be helpful.
It's a good idea, and we've been talking about it. You've been listening in on some of our conversations. So just in the last 2 weeks, we have talked about how do we, again, provide a training, a Synod-wide training for ruling elders. All ruling elders are supposed to be apt to preach and teach the gospel. So all ruling elders know that. But we talked about bringing in some people who can do some training around worship leadership and provide Synod-wide training. The other thing that you're speaking to is the fact that across our denomination, there is no standard preparation process for commissioned pastors. Next month, we have pulled together about a group of 10 people. And if you're interested, I would love for you to be a part of that conversation as well. 10 people who are going to be looking at how do we standardize within the Synod of the Northeast the preparation process and the support and training of commissioned pastors. We don't feel like we need to reinvent the wheel as far as training, because there are many training programs that are available through our War for SEALs. Anyone who wants to go to Dubuque or some of the other training programs, they can certainly apply for scholarships to do that. But what should be the preparation in the vocational process of really determining if people have a sense of call and how they might be able to serve? So I invite you, this conversation will begin next week. And we look forward to being in conversation with our mid-council leaders, looking at what you're already doing and what's already working, and how can we add to on the Synod level to make this a possibility. Thank you. I hope you will message me if you're interested in participating. I know you have a lot to share. Patricia.
One of the things that Brook Church has done, and it was probably about 10 years now ago that we started doing it, and then we've stopped since, but we were using the students at Princeton Seminary to come in, a different student each week, to bring their sermon. And for us, it was each one of these young people brought their A game. You had that sense that they felt they were so honored to be in that pulpit, instead of the feeling of entitlement to be in the pulpit. And what it also did, it gave our older people in our congregation the chance to talk to these young people and critique their sermons and give them some long advice, long experienced advice on, how they're doing. And I just wanted to say that for any other smaller congregations that are on here, that is one way that we support those new pastors, and we raise them up and bring them in and give them a chance, because that works for both places, both ways. They get a chance to be in a pulpit, and we get a chance to hear this beautiful sermon each week.
Yes. And so you're talking about the model of teaching congregations. I sometimes share this story when I do training for transitional pastors and for congregations around right-sizing ministry. My husband Murphy will tell you that there is a very small congregation in Anderson, South Carolina. It was more than 90 minutes away from where we lived. And I'm sorry, 90 minutes we wished. It was 90 miles away from where we lived. And that congregation had 15 people in worship. And if you had 25, you had a full church. But that congregation was a teaching congregation. And one year I had the opportunity to share the names of individuals that had come through that congregation who were currently serving the denomination. So myself, my husband Murphy, who's online, our stated clerk, J. Herbert Nelson, Jimmy Hawkins, who will be presenting to our denomination, Brian Wade, who now is a mid-council leader, and the list goes on and on of people who got their feet wet in ministry with a congregation that had 15 people in worship. And I believe they've got 15 people in worship today, but they were a teaching congregation. The other thing I want to add is that a program that I began right before I left Minnesota Valley's Presbytery was an internship program. And some congregations will know about this because seminaries used to have, all seminaries require field education. But some seminaries will have a summer program where you can have an intern that stays with you for the summer, and some have a 9-month program. Before I left Minnesota Valley's Presbytery, because we had many rural congregations and we had smaller congregations, we introduced that program. And it was a great benefit for students to get the experience to really discern, do they have a call to serve smaller congregations? And also, they had a chance to work in a different ministry setting. It was a wonderful program. And I would imagine just geographically where we are here as a synod would really be attractive. I can imagine people raising their hands for such a program. We look forward to getting that program started sometime in 2022. Thank you for your questions. Other questions? Any other questions? I'm just scanning to see, are there any questions in chat?
No, there aren't any questions in the chat at this time.
Looks like Nancy has a question.
Sandana and I talk practically every day, but this is a question I haven't asked you, Sandana.
Okay,
And that
Nancy.
is,
Now you
and
know I
that
get
is-
you back. I'm getting you back if it's not a good one, right?
I'm being very careful.
Okay. All right.
I'm just curious to know, in coming to the Synod of the Northeast, you clearly had discussions with the search committee. You clearly did your own research. You clearly knew people serving within the Synod of the Northeast. But what has surprised you about coming here?
It's colder than Minnesota in October. It's not supposed to be colder than Minnesota. I've been around a little bit. And so it's not the first time I've served in the Northeast, but it is a different context. I started off serving in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, so central Pennsylvania, and then went to Newcastle, Delaware. And so 11 of my ministry years was served between Pennsylvania and Delaware. What I've been surprised about are the resources that are available. When I talk about our Synod having resources, people resources, and financial resources, and the amount of financial support that the Synod gives to congregations and to ministry groups, I am surprised. There are few programmatic synods that are able to give out that type of funds for grants. So every time I think about that, it surprises me at the level of the commitment of the Synod to really, I'll say it this way, put its money where its mouth is. That was a surprise to me. I also think that like most organizations, the Synod is really trying to fulfill its mission. So sometimes you hear people say, this is what we want to be about, and it's a lot of talk. But I see this intentional effort, and that's not to say that we don't have work to do. We've got some work to do, but we're doing some work. And I think that there's an openness to really looking at who we are, our identity, living into certain values. And so I am glad to be along for the journey. Thanks for the question, Nancy.
Sandana, I see a question in the
Thank you.
chat.
Okay.
The question is from Edgar Hayes, and he says, now that we've defined a need to deal with systemic racism in the church, has the scope been defined? What is the scope of the problem in this synod? That helps to define what resources and the amount to deal with the situation.
Mm-hmm. So we're still learning and listening. We're still hearing that there are difficulties with people of color being able to fully serve, or if they're invited to serve, really fully being welcomed into the ministries that they are called to. We hear that. The challenges of inequitable relationships where people literally are seeing this great difference between people who are people of color who are serving with absolutely minimum benefits and very low compensation. There seems to be an inequality in the Synod around some of those issues. And so that's the reality. We do know that in some places that we haven't addressed. We haven't had the hard conversations around bias. We also haven't really talked about what we're going to talk about today, the impact of the doctrine of discovery. There's some re-educating that needs to happen across the United States. I think in 2019 and 2020, we probably have seen the worst of the way we have had relationships, race relationships, in our country. And here's an opportunity for the church to say what it believes. And I can tell you that as I watched what I would call the other pandemic that we had in our nation, it sorrowed me to hear what the church was saying or what the church did not say. And so I think we need to begin with creating space for these larger scale dialogues and then creating some steps. I don't know if you are aware, this idea of building relationships with our Native American siblings started a little while ago, but it had not been fully acted upon. We took steps back in July to say, we don't want to just say we want to do this. We want to build relationships. We want to repair harm. That's what reparations is. It's not about 50 acres and a mule. It's about repairing the injuries, the harm that has been done. So let us begin with some conversations and then put in place some action plans that we certainly can follow through on. So I'm going to ask you to continue to listen. I ask you to join the conversations, and I think you'll see that we're going to be more than just talk. Who's next, Lori?
Denise Leslie has her hand up.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Denise Leslie. I'm a member of Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and our sister church is Nassau Presbyterian Church. We have been in joint partnership having courageous conversations around race and social justice for over 18 months now. But I wanted to pick up on the point you made about reparations and generosity. We have to thank you, the Synod of the Northeast, because back in 2015, when we were struggling to make a case that that our little church just deserves some reparations, the Synod of the Northeast stepped up. William Drew Roberson was our pastor. His call was terminated by the Presbytery of New Brunswick, but it was the Synod of the Northeast that stepped up and paid for the mortgage for the Paul Robeson House of Princeton. So, and that was over $170,000 gift to our session, Witherspoon session. And in making that happen, the pastor from Nassau, the Princeton Theological Seminary, John White, Dave Davis was from, and our pastor, and all of our sessions, as well as the Paul Robeson 501c3 that was working on the renovations of the house came together. But it was the Synod who absolutely knew what the right thing to do was, and they stepped up and they did it. So, and I hope you'll continue to be as generous, and we'll have more to say about courageous conversations. We're having a pairing of churches where the white member from Nassau typically, because Nassau was the segregated church, and the African-American person from Witherspoon are meeting together, and we're having small groups and talking about the very things you describe. The doctrine of discovery was one of the big things that caught my eye in terms of this come to the table, that's why I'm here, to pay attention to this conference. But we're talking about, policing the police, reparations, what is equity, talking about housing affordability, all the issues that are local to Mercer County, but yet larger still. So I just want to say thank you. And also we'll keep looking and talking and hoping that the Synod of the Northeast will continue to be a great friend to both Witherspoon and Nassau Church in Mercer.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that story. We need to know the stories of how our resources impact the greater Synod. And I want to say this, things like that can't happen without your per capita dollars. So it is the way that you generously support the Synod that we're able to do the good work that you described. We want to hear the stories like what you've shared, Denise, and other stories for you as you think about what you're doing in your presbyteries. Tell us so that we can share those stories. We want to be about connections, creating connections, those cross-pollination of ideas. I love what you're talking about. Let me sit in sometime on a conversation. I would love to do that. So we're going to go to Carla and to William, and I know that we're getting close to our time.
Thank you, Sandana. First off, I want to thank you for looking at the smaller churches and the Native American churches, because we have been the ones that have been passed over several times. Seems like every time we go to the presbytery, which is rare because we've been supporting ourselves all this time, we start a conversation, we'll get into starting to move forward, and all of a sudden, everybody that's helping us disappears. And this has been happening year after year after year, several times. And it just recently happened in this past year or so. And we're actually trying to restore and preserve our church. It's going to take a lot of a lot of dollars to do this. We've been doing very much fundraising. We're a very small congregation. We're probably under 15 at this time. We have many members that have grown up in this church, but they're all over the country. They're not present here at the church. And we do need to pull together and work on these little churches because we're the only church on this side of our county that's presbytery. All the rest are gone. Even though we're small, we're our community church. We stand for our entire community, our village. We're the ones they come to for weddings. We're the ones they come to for baptisms. We're the ones they come to for funerals. And if we don't preserve this church, there's not going to be any presbytery on this end of our county at all. So I appreciate that you're working on dealing with the smaller churches and the Native American church, which is a part of our background, as well as African American. So the racism card has been played many times, but I really appreciate that you're working in that direction.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carla. And one of the things that we are committed to doing, we sent a delegation of people to the Shinnecock Nation. And that was, I have to just thank Holly and everyone that went. It was an eye-opening experience, but it's not our only stop. And so we look forward to visiting some of our other Native American siblings around the Synod and looking for ways to find partnerships and what we can do to support ministry. So we will be talking with you, Carla and Patricia, and we'll be looking for people who want to be a part of that next delegation of people to do the site visit and to come back with some recommendations about next steps. I'm so glad you're here. I won't stop saying that because I am so glad that you're here today. William.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm William Reyes. I represent the Hispanic Latino caucus of the Synod of the Northeast. And one of the meetings we had is after the Reverend Dr. Amaury Tañón left Hispanic Latino Voice, which was working in the administration of the Synod of the Northeast, which we no longer have 7 months ago. But that position, I don't know where it did go. And we are very concerned because we have representation, inclusivity. Speaking about Matthew 25, we are part of that, of God's inclusivity, not only on paper, but on the practice, because we, the Hispanic Latino caucus, is doing our ministry in the name of Jesus Christ. So we are there active. And to us, people mean people, as well as for all of us, I hope. But the situation is that there's no Hispanic Latino person, woman or man, and we can be of help to you to get that inclusivity in reality. And we are respectfully asking to reconsider that it should be a person there because it has happened in the past and it should not be stopped now because there is a crisis along the nation because of the pandemic and shortage of staff and the like. There's always resources when an intentional attitude is taken in the name of God, then that could be done. And I am the voice of representing the Hispanic Latino caucus in that respectful matter. And we are respectfully demanding that that be taken into rightful consideration and have a Hispanic Latino employee there as well. Inclusivity is not only written there, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has to be taken action. And I am the person that is represented to take the faith beyond prayer into action. Thank you for listening to me and thank you for your good work.
Thank you, William. We certainly will take what you're saying into consideration. One of the things that we will do as we look at the new way forward is look at our staffing plan. And so we certainly want to have the opportunity to be representative in our staff. And I think that that's important, but we want to make sure that we have people who feel a sense of call to the work in the positions that we have open. So that's something that as we move forward in the future, we will look at our staffing plan. We're not exactly sure what we're going to look like. All of the organizations of the church are looking at their resources, their administrative costs, and we're still seeing. We don't know yet what all the needs are, but we are listening. We're listening to your requests. So William, we have a comment from you. We understand where you all are coming from and would like to make sure that there is a person of Latina heritage on the Synod staff, and we hear that. And so continue to be in conversation with us about that, and we'll let you know where we are. We just don't know. And I know that that's probably not the answer that people want to hear, but we are still assessing how many people we need on our Synod staff, what that structure will look forward. We need to know how many people do we need in order to fulfill the Synod's mission. And we still don't have those answers. So it's, it's going to take us some more time to figure those things out, but we hear your concerns.
I will put it in black and white to you, so to confirm it and to hold you kind of responsible in your goodwill to work along with us so that it could happen in reality. Thank you so much.
Please feel free to always send us your requests, and we certainly are open to listening and hearing. We appreciate that. At this time, my time is up. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be in conversation with you today. This doesn't need to be the last conversation. And so we will continue to create space. William, invite me to your caucus meeting. I'm looking forward to coming. Okay.
Well, I will invite you in writing, and you are already invited.
I just need a date.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. We are back over to you, Lori.